Hi, friends. I'm Rob Tigan.
And I'm Joanna, and this is the Growing Home Together podcast.
We're caring for the soul of your family, helping you grow closer to God
and each other.
Thank you for joining us today on the Growing Home Together podcast. Father's Day is soon approaching, and it's a great time to celebrate both your father and your own life as a dad. I know for me, it's also a time to reflect and think about the joy and responsibility of raising my kids. I think every dad I know desires to be actively involved in his kid's life, and he wants to leave a legacy that lasts even after they're grown. However, many of us struggle to know how to do this. Maybe you're one of the 1 in 3 households that grew up without a dad in your home. Maybe your dad was around but was detached or uninvolved in your life. Or maybe for you, you're struggling to juggle your busy schedule or stress and carry the weight of being a good dad too. That is why I'm super excited to welcome today's guest, Blake Brewer. Blake is the CEO and founder of the Endurance and the Legacy Letter Challenge. His mission is to empower fathers to connect with their kids, lead their families, and run their God-given race with endurance. He's got a powerful story about his own father that changed the course of his life and calling. Welcome to the program, Blake.
Hey, Rob, how are you doing, man? I'm so glad to be here, and I'm excited for what you guys are doing and how you're serving so many different people and so many different families, and I just appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Yeah, well, we appreciate having you, and I'm glad that we get a chance to get together just to talk dad to dad today. And for me, at this time of year, I know I'm missing my father who passed away several years ago. Could you share a little bit about your family and your relationship with your own dad?
Yeah, Father's Day is a time for me to be, thinking about my dad and reflecting on him and just how grateful I am for the time that he invested in me for 19 years of my life, which I know we're going to get into that story. Mm-hmm. But then now that I am a dad and I have Gracie Kate, who's 5, Bo, who's 3, Brooks, who's 6 months. And last night, Bo, at 3 years old, we had his first T-ball game, and I was out there coaching him, helping him hit the ball and run the bases. And I'm just like every other dad that you even talked about this in the intro, but man, I desperately just want to be a good dad, connect with my children. I want my children to grow up and be successful. I don't want to have any regrets. I'm already thinking about when they're entering the teenage years, when they're leaving to go off to college or whatever they might be. And, I don't want to have any regrets. I would just want to know that I did the best that I could to help them and be the voice in their life that they need, and the voice that my dad was for me. But man, I'm feeling it. Like you're juggling everything. You're trying to be a provider, and you're trying to be a good husband. You're trying to be a good neighbor. Man, it's not easy to be a great dad.
Yeah, for sure. And how many kids did you say you have?
So 3 kids.
3 kids. Nice. So what did your dad do for you that made such an impact on your life?
Well, before I jump into that, because what he did for me absolutely changed my life, and now I'm helping other dads do this as well. But what my dad did for me was to get his voice into my life, which I think the father's voice is the most powerful voice on the planet. We all kind of have that inner voice in our life, and our father can be the one that can shape that voice as we're living life. So for example, I was talking to a 70-year-old man a couple years ago in a coffee shop. I didn't know him super well, but we just kind of hit it off. And he just kind of naturally tells me that at 70 years old, he's still living to make his dad proud. And as he talked, he said, my dad died 30 years ago. And what his dad never did for him was to tell him that he was proud of him. So this man, as I got to know him, I could tell he had basically neglected his entire family to try to work on his career to somehow make his dad proud. But on the flip side of that, Kobe Bryant was sharing in an interview about a year before his death, when Kobe was 12 years old, he played summer league basketball. And he did not score a single point the entire summer. And he was so frustrated that he didn't score, and he was disappointed. And his father came up to him at the end of the season and put his arm around him and said, Kobe, I don't care whether you score 0 points or score 60 points. I just love you no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And Kobe, that's the power of a father's voice, because Kobe said that was the best thing that his father could have ever told him. And it freed him up to fail. He could just go out there and just risk it and do the best that he could, because his father already loved him. And, as a father right now in the world that we're living in, I think this is so important, because we're facing more competition than ever before in history to get our voice into our child's life with social media. Kids are on Instagram 7.5 to 9 hours a day. They're on TikTok. The competition is there, and the world is screaming at our children every single day, hey, come follow me. And so what I tell dads is we've got to do whatever it takes to get our voice into our children's life. And so that's where my dad's story comes in, and what he did for me and the mission that I'm on now. But when I was 19 years old, my family and I took a vacation to Hawaii. And Rob, we've been to like Florida before, we'd been to Colorado, but this was like the pinnacle vacation, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And it was my sister and my brother and my mom and dad and my grandmother actually went with us. And the first day that we were there, we went to Hanama Bay. And you said you've been there before, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
Yeah, so you know how beautiful it is. And of course, as soon as we get there, we jump in the water and we
Mm-hmm.
start snorkeling. And it was my dad and my sister and I out in the water. And then we saw some beautiful fish. We saw a sea turtle, and then we decided, let's go inside and go back to the beach and rest. And so I remember laying on the beach. My sister was laying on the beach. My mom was laying on the beach, and my dad never sat down. And my dad was standing there. And after a couple of minutes, my dad said, man, we're in Hawaii. Like, I'm not laying on the beach. I'm going back out there. And my dad was a really athletic guy. My dad was drafted into the NFL by the Atlanta Falcons.
Wow.
My dad was Terry Bradshaw's tight end at Louisiana Tech, and they were best friends and roommates. So that was actually my claim to fame growing up, was my dad was Terry Bradshaw's tight end. He caught his first ever touchdown pass.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So my dad starts walking down the beach to go to this new spot snorkeling. And I remember laying there and thinking, man, I just want to go be with my dad. So I got up off the towel, off the beach, ran down to my dad and caught up to him. And my dad looked at me with a smile and said, look who decided to join me. And it was in that moment, and I've reflected on this, my dad just made me feel that he just enjoyed being with me.
Mm.
And I think this is one of the best gifts that a dad can give his children, is just to simply enjoy spending time with his children. And that's what my dad did for me my whole life, but especially in this moment. And so we go out into the water, and of course, we're not just going to stay in the shallow end. You said you've been there before. So we were kind of on the right side of the beach, and we just started going out into the water. And so we were getting further away from the beach, but we still had the rocks over there on the right side.
Mm-hmm.
And after snorkeling for a while, I remember thinking, okay, where'd my dad go? And I put my head out of the water, and he's not around me. And we were in an area that I now know is called Witch's Brew. And I then see my dad getting out of the water. And there was one rock that you could really get out of the water on. And I remember thinking, this is not smart for him to be getting out of the water right there, because the waves are just crashing against it. And sure enough, as my dad was about halfway out of the water, a wave comes, crashes against him, knocks him back down in the water. And I'm immediately thinking, I bet he's in trouble. So I started swimming towards him, but we've been snorkeling for a while, so I'm exhausted. And I think, gosh, I got to get out of the water. And by God's grace, I'm able to get out of the water at that same rock, in between the waves. And as soon as I get on top of this rock, I look down in the water, and I see my dad. And my dad is treading water, and he looks up at me, and I could tell that he wasn't doing well, but he just simply said, help. I need help. And my dad had this deep booming voice, and this was just kind of a soft whimper. And so I turned around towards the beach and I just started waving my hands and shouting, but the beach was so far away. I didn't even know if they could see me. I knew they probably couldn't hear me. I turned back around, my dad's still treading water. And I just remember thinking, I can't just stand here and do nothing. I've got to jump in and try to do something. And so I jump in. By this point, my dad is probably 20 or 30 yards away. And I just put my head underwater and just started swimming as fast as I could to where he was. And by the time I had reached my dad, he was unconscious, just kind of underneath the water, just floating there. And at this point, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like this is serious. I still had hope that we could get my dad to shore and get him out of the water. And I put my arms around him and just started swimming with him to get around to the other side of that rock to get him to shore. And the lifeguard showed up and another snorkeler showed up and helped me get my dad to shore. And they started doing CPR. And like in the movies, when they're doing CPR to someone and the water just kind of gurgles out of their mouth and their eyes kind of flicker open, I was expecting that to happen at any moment. I was on my hands and knees just praying to God, God, please save my dad. And at that moment, my mom and sister, who had been at the beach, they saw the commotion around this area and they ran over because they said, that's where Dad and Blake were snorkeling. So they run over, and of course, it's their worst nightmare. They see Dad on the ground, they see me there. And I told my mom, I'll never forget the look on her face. And I just said, Mom, it doesn't look good. I don't think he's going to make it. And they loaded my dad up in the ambulance. My mom went with them, and my sister and I drove the rental car, and we had to go to the condo to get my brother and grandmother. And it was at that time that we got the news. They had made it to the hospital, and they had pronounced my dad dead. And in a matter of moments, Rob, my life was turned upside down. It went from one of the best days of my life in a matter of moments. One of the worst, the worst. My dad's gone. Yeah. And we went back to after going to the hospital and seeing my dad one final time, and we even talked to the chaplain, but we went back to the condo, and I just remember sitting on the back bedroom on the bed, and my mom comes to the doorway, and I'm in the middle of, honestly, I was just totally distraught. I was asking God all the hard questions, like, where were you, God? Why did this happen? And my mom says, I was going through your dad's suitcase, and I found something that he was going to give you on this trip. I had no idea what she was talking about. She walks across the room and hands me some papers. And at the top of this paper, it says, Dear Blake, Natalie, and Marcus. And my mom says, for the last several months, your dad has been writing a letter to you guys. And so my dad had no idea that he was about to die. He was just being a good dad and writing a letter, getting his thoughts, getting his voice onto a piece of paper. He was going to give it to me on this trip. And I began to read this letter, and, it was my dad's last words to me. He didn't know it was going to be, but it was my dad's last words to me. And it was just a letter of encouragement. It was a letter of wisdom. It was a letter of him guiding us. And really, he used this letter. I had an awesome dad. He was a great dad, but he was not a perfect dad. Mm-hmm. And what my dad was using this letter to do was to point us to our perfect Heavenly Father. And the last line of this letter said, Blake, you might be in the minority here on earth for your faith, but I assure you that in heaven you'll be in the majority. Love your dear old dad in Christ Jesus. And so, Rob, I just felt such a peace knowing where my dad was, and that I've told people before that if God had even given my dad an option to come back to earth, my dad would say, nah, I think I'll just stay right here and I'll wait on them. Yeah. Wow. And so I'm so grateful that my dad took the time to write that letter. I don't know what else he could have been doing there in those couple months, or what TV show he gave up for him to work on this letter and write it. But I got to tell you, I'm so grateful that he did that, because I don't even know if I would be here today if my dad had not have taken time to write that letter. And uh, it's, every phase of my life, that letter has taken on new meaning, and my dad's words have taken on new meaning, from when I was single to married to now that I have kids. And so ultimately that led me to the mission that I'm on now, to help 1 million dads write at least one well-written, meaningful, lasting legacy letter.
Hi, friends. Rob and Joanna Tigan of Growing Home Together are the parents of 5 kids ranging in age from elementary school to high school to adult newlyweds. They know the fun and joy, and also the stress and confusion that could come with raising kids through all the ages and stages of growing up. Just like you, they worry over their children's safety and well-being. They feel the pressure to train their kids to do what's right, and they carry sadness when their kids struggle or make poor choices. And as parents like you, their greatest hope is to bring up children who know God's love in their life. But Rob and Joanna know they can't control what happens to their kids or the people they become. They have learned how important it is to place their sons and daughters in God's hands. And most of all, they have learned the power of prayer to make a difference in their children's lives. That is why they are so passionate to help moms and dads like you to pray for your kids. They created 2 amazing resources, Powerful Prayers for Your Son and Powerful Prayers for Your Daughter. These beautiful books offer page after page of targeted prayers that cover every kind of challenge and hope your kids will face as they grow. Is your child facing hard circumstances? Are they lonely or anxious? Do they struggle to know God or trust Him? Is it hard to build a close relationship together? Take hold of Powerful Prayers for Your Son and Powerful Prayers for Your Daughter to invite God's love and power into your child's life today. Each title is available for you at growinghometogether.com or wherever books are sold. And now, back to the show.
Wow, that's that is I said at the beginning a powerful story, but that there's so many questions going through my mind with that. I think just even thinking through you being 19 and going through that and that process. But I think of your dad. I'm not too far from from that age, and I think of Psalm 90 that says, "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." And it sounds like your dad, did that. He invested as a husband and a father, and even with this letter, is that how had he ever communicated in that way before, or was that kind of a new?
No, my dad had never written us a letter, and I would not describe my dad as this really outgoing guy, or this guy, that shared a lot. But for whatever reason, I still to this day, I was actually talking to my mom about it the other day, like what actually inspired Dad to write this letter, and we don't know.
Yeah, it's just and I think it's easy to think, oh, maybe I'll come up with the words, or maybe I'll do that thing tomorrow. But obviously the Lord prompted your dad, and then for his last kind of words in that letter to be, his voice to encourage you, that in heaven, and so, I can see that would be a huge, huge comfort in that time. And, it reiterates what you're saying about the importance of and the power of a father's voice, because it propelled you in a different direction, didn't it?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Because basically every decision that I've made since then, I've had a different perspective on life. For one, more of this eternal perspective, and more of, okay, what matters to God? Because I want to live for the things that matter for God. And then as I face different decisions, for example, when I was graduating college, I had an accounting degree. The plan the entire time was to go into business. and I had this offer to go work for this campus ministry. And I mean, it didn't make sense at all to the world for me to go work for this campus ministry when I've been training to go into business. And to be honest, I put it off, and I was thinking, man, I don't know if I really want to go do that. I'm not going to have as much prestige. I'm not going to make as much money. There won't be as much financial security. And to be honest, there were some fears that I had about going to do this job. And it was my father's voice that was saying, hey, Blake, if God is calling you to go do this, you just have to trust him. It doesn't have to make sense to the world. You may not have to see the full picture. Just take this one step of faith. And if God's calling you to go do this, he'll take care of you. And so I initially thought I was going to do it for 3 years, ended up doing it for over a decade. During that time, I met my wife. I wouldn't have my family, my 3 kids, if I hadn't made that decision. My wife and I had the privilege of starting a new ministry at a new campus during this time, where we literally saw hundreds and hundreds of students come to faith. And to think, man, I would have missed out on all of that if it wasn't for my dad and his voice, ultimately guiding me and pushing me to follow God.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier about the gentleman that had spent 30 years chasing that approval from his dad, and you're maybe didn't have your dad on earth as long, but because he kept speaking into your life, you still had that voice directing you, and you were able to kind of choose, I guess, maybe some of the harder things because you weren't chasing after that approval, so you can check off the box of, well, is money the most important thing, or is prestige the most important thing, or whatever, because your dad, it was in the wings, so to speak, kind of encouraging you what the right priorities were. So you created this amazing strategy to help dads impact their kids' lives in just a real, I guess, simple, maybe not easy, but simple way, called the Legacy Letter. Can you tell us about the Legacy Letter Challenge and how you can help dads write these letters?
Well, yeah, I realized really early on that most dads can agree, like, hey, this is a good idea, I should do it. But then, like you said, the idea of writing a letter is so simple, but it's not necessarily easy, and especially with everything going on in life. And so I just said, from my end, I've got to do whatever it takes to help dads write this letter. And what I tell dads is every dad has a letter in their heart, and I'm just going to help you draw that letter out from your heart to your mind to a piece of paper. So we created an online kind of go at your own pace course where we walk through different sections of the letter, and I help dads think through the things that they want to share, but their children absolutely need to hear from them. And so one of the sections of the letter is the 3 things that every person needs to hear from their dad. I love you. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you not for what you've done or what you're going to do. I'm just proud of you for who you are, and I believe in you. And so one of the dads that so I also do some one-on-one coaching and some group coaching, but ended up getting connected to one of the vice presidents of the Arizona Cardinals. And I've been helping him work through his letter. And so he's writing these things out to his 12-year-old daughter because she's about to be entering her teenage years, and he sees the importance of him really speaking into her life during this time. And so he's doing everything he can to make sure that she knows, man, she's got a daddy that loves her, that's proud of her. She doesn't have to seek the approval of her friends or from some guy. She's got a daddy that loves her. And then also in the letter, we come up with 3 to 5 pieces of advice. I tell dads to imagine yourself on your deathbed, and your children have their entire life in front of them. And you know that they're going to face different obstacles, different temptations, different trials. You know that they're going to have failures in life, because we all have failures in life. And so what is the advice that you're going to give your children to make it through that time? And hopefully you're not on your deathbed and that you're going to live a long life, but it just kind of gets you in the mindset of what you want to share with them. And so we think through this, and then the dads put this onto a piece of paper and they give this to their children. And so, dads ask me, okay, when is the best time for me to write this letter? And my answer to that is, the best time to write this letter is the day that your children are born.
Mm-hmm.
Because number one, you don't know when your last day on this planet is, and you want to make sure that your children have your voice in their life, no matter what happens to you.
Right.
But then the second best time to write it is now.
Yeah.
Because it's not about if you die, it's about getting your voice in their life like as soon as possible. Because they need us. They need our voice.
Yeah, I'm a writer, and yet I think having someone help guide me through that process would probably be really important, because I think I would wonder, am I missing anything? Am I saying the right things? How do I go about this process? But you're right. I mean, really, any dad, if you're looking for a way to connect with your kid and speak into their lives, this is a simple way that at any stage you can start it.
Yeah, and I gotta tell you, it's one of the most rewarding things on my end whenever I get that message from a dad saying, "Oh, I just gave this letter to my child." And so I got that message from a dad the other day. He gave it to his adult children, and he had some things. He had needed to apologize for, and some things he needed to express. And a lot of times as dads, we think that our children are hearing us and that we've communicated, "I love you and I'm proud of you." Like, surely they know that. But this is a way to, number one, remove all doubt. Like, hey, I have clearly said this. My children know that I love them. They know that I'm proud of them. And then it's lasting. So if anything happens to me, or if I'm not there with my children, like, man, it's there. They can keep going back to this letter and reading it over and over again.
Yeah. So you had mentioned that I think your dad's letter had all yours and your siblings' names on it. Is that right? So would you recommend that dads write a letter to each kid, or to kind of for their specific, encouragement, or how would you suggest going about that?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. So, every dad has a different number of kids, and it can be kind of overwhelming. So I say, absolutely, if you feel good about writing a letter to each kid, man, let's do it. But if that feels overwhelming, let's just start with writing a letter to all your children. We'll get that going. And then as dads, as you write that, and then it actually becomes easier to individualize it to each child. And so there's some things that you might write to all of your children that are very similar or the same, and then you can individualize different portions of it. Well, and then another question that I get is, how many should I write? And so, my mission is to help dads write at least one, but a lot of dads are, once we've learned this process, some dads say, I want to write one every year. Some dads are, kind of made at those major moments, whether, they're entering the teenage years or turning 16 or, going off to college or leaving the house. So it's kind of up to each dad what he wants to do.
Okay. And so how do you coach them through this? Is it?
Well, if they go through the self-directed course, we've got 10 lessons, and it's a 10 to 15 minute video. And then it's in my online community. So you have access to me each week. I do a couple office hours. So if a dad has any questions, they can jump on the Zoom call. It's usually like Wednesday at noon or Thursday at noon. And, but it's kind of like a Facebook group. It's not Facebook, but like you can ask questions on there or leave comments and things like that. But I'm doing everything on my end to help dads write this letter. And then it's also pretty neat because a lot of dads, as they've written their letter, have said, man, I want to give this gift to other dads in my life. So I have financial advisors and insurance agents who are buying this as a gift to their clients or to people in their life. And then I've had business owners who are now buying this for the employees or the dads that work for them. So it's pretty neat what God is doing.
Yeah, that is so awesome. I can see that, being a great Father's Day gift to pass along and encourage dads to keep the legacy going. And, you had mentioned there's so many things in our culture that make it just hard for us as fathers to connect with our kids. And I think, I'm sure your dad got to heaven and was praising the Lord for prompting him to, like you said, maybe give up a show and give up a few things to have that letter, to carry on his legacy and to keep encouraging you guys as you go along. So I think that is so awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's no dad that finishes this letter and regrets writing it. I mean, every dad. I mean, it's like a dad out of Dallas that he finished his letter a couple weeks ago. He said, "Man, this is the best thing that I've ever done as a father." He's got young children. I think he has a 3-year-old son and a 5-year-old, and he said, "Man, I knew how I felt about my children, but it was just really hard. I never like collected my thoughts and put them all together, and so this is just even helping me." Now that I've written this letter, helping me be a better father to my children.
Yeah. It is, just going back to the dad's voice, and I'm just thinking, so my dad, he passed away back in November of 2012, and he never wrote a letter or anything. And it's just interesting because I held on to the voicemail. So we lived on the West Coast, and we moved back to the Midwest a few years before he passed, and I was trying to get back, but I didn't make it in time. And so I held on to the voicemail that my mom sent me, letting me know that he had passed. And it's interesting because to me, I haven't deleted that voicemail off my phone. And it wasn't even his voice, but it was that last kind of connection. And we were my daughter was talking the other day. One thing my dad always was good with was names. So he always called me dude, but he always called my oldest daughter his little champ or his little champion. And my daughter, just those words, the encouragement that it still gives her and the courage it still gives her to do that. So, like we're saying, it can start so simple and yet can be so profound. And I know I'm going to have you hold me accountable, Blake, because I'm going to sign up for your course. I haven't decided if I'm going to do the self-guided or the coaching one yet, but I'm going to sign up. So I'm letting the world know here, and I'm letting you know that to keep me accountable to that, because I think it's a powerful thing. So as we kind of wrap up here, I know that for a lot of dads, they want to get involved with their kids, but they struggle to know how. So what is one thing you'd like to tell the dad who wonders if he's got what it takes?
Well, every dad out there has exactly what it takes. It doesn't take that much to be a great dad. You just have to show up and be there. And then if any dad out there wants some help writing his legacy letter, you can go to legacyletterchallenge.com, and it would be, one of my greatest joys to help write his legacy letter.
Appreciate that. What I would love to, if you wouldn't mind, would you mind taking a minute to pray for the dads who are ready to commit a stronger relationship with their children, just that God would help them in that?
Yeah, absolutely. Dear God, I am so grateful for all the dads that are out there that are listening, and God, that they would even be taking the time to be listening to a podcast like this. God, I pray that as they're thinking through how they can best guide their families and lead their families and connect with their children and speak into their life, God, that you would just bless them in that. God, that you would just give them confidence to keep doing what they're doing and be great dads. God, that you would keep the distractions away from us, God, and that I would, for myself and for all the dads, that we would not put anything in front of whether it's my cell phone or TV or whatever it might be from spending time with my children and leading my children. God, we love you so much, and we thank you so much for just how you've loved us, how you are a perfect father. God, please help us be the father that you're calling us to be to our children. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Well, thank you, Blake, for taking the time to share with us today. And I know for me and many dads listening that your encouraging story and the legacy that your dad passed on to you too is helping us go out and be stronger and more intentional with our kids. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, friends, for joining us today on the Growing Home Together podcast. We would love to connect with you and share our resources as well. We've got some prayer books on there, creative family activities, dad-daughter date ideas, and even a free devotional for you and your wife. If you go to growinghometogether.com, we'd love to connect with you in any way we can. And at Growing Home Together, Joanna and I are caring for the soul of your family and growing home together with you. Thank you very much. Bye.